Hey everyone, welcome back to another powerful episode of Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I'm your host Avik, and today we are shining a light, I would say, on an issue that impacts millions of women but is still surrounded by the stigma or silence and I would say misunderstanding as well, which is the woman's mental health, wellness, and obviously society, particularly when it comes to the mood swings, hormonal imbalances, PMS, PMDD. Yes. And dear listeners, our guest today is someone who has been into a powerful voice for the menstrual equity and the woman's health from a very, very young age. And I'm really delighted to welcome Ananya Grover. So, welcome to the show, Ananya.
Thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction.
Amazing, amazing. Dear listeners, as you know, I introduce you with lovely guests on daily basis. Today, I'd love to introduce you with Ananya. So, Ananya is a Princeton's graduate in computer science with a fascinating blend of, I would say, minors in cognitive science, technology policy, and the creative writing. So, she has been a menstrual equity activist since she was 17 and has given a TED talk on period positivity at TED headquarters in NYC. Yes, and which has nearly 2 million views. Yeah, and she is the founder of HealCycle, a digital health solution which is transforming the awareness and care for premenstrual mood disorders like PMS, PMDD, and PME. So she has worked at Apple, the German Aerospace Center, and the Delhi Princeton Toyin. But what sets her apart is her mission-driven work, like building the communities and the digital tools that empower women to better understand and at the same time take charge of their mental and the reproductive health. So, dear listeners, this conversation is not just about the biology, but it's all about identity, empowerment, and rewriting the narrative around women's wellness. So, why to wait? Let's get started. Welcome to the show again.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited to be here.
Amazing. So Ananya, like many people reduce PMS kind of to a joke about mood swings, right? But the reality is far more than complex. And I'd say at times, like it's debilitating. So from there, like how do you explain this difference between PMS, PMDD, and PME?
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. PMS itself is such a broad spectrum. So it's a cluster of, some research papers say, about 150 different symptoms. And that's why it's called premenstrual syndrome. So syndrome is always like, there's no proper definition sometimes. And it's like a broad cluster of many different symptoms that are included in one umbrella term. So for some women, it can be mild, manageable. They don't notice it much. And then for others, it can be on this range or spectrum of moderate to severe. And I always describe PMDD or premenstrual dysphoric disorder as this sort of evil cousin of PMS. So in some ways, some of the biological mechanisms are similar, but also different. And there is still research happening behind the different root causes. But PMDD is a very severe, like cyclical disorder that really affects mental health. So it even feels like bipolar disorder sometimes to women and it's commonly misdiagnosed as that. Because imagine that for 2 weeks of the month, you're completely normal, happy, energetic, bubbly. And then right before your period is about to start. And sometimes if you're not keeping track, if you're not, if you don't have that kind of app or that kind of solution available to you, you're not always making that connection that the reason that I'm suddenly feeling this way or suddenly feeling much more anxious and having fights or breaking down more easily on petty issues that wouldn't normally bother me. Maybe it's like depressive episodes, self-harming thoughts, and all of those, destructive, negative thoughts that come to you. How do you really link that to your menstrual cycle, right? Because we're not really taught of the period as beyond these like 5 to 7 days where you menstruate, you are bleeding, and that's mainly what most people, whether it's men or even women, know about their cycle. It's only now where we have started talking a little bit more about getting it beyond the biology textbook and being like,
Yeah.
okay, these 4 different phases actually do affect your hormone levels are changing, they're cycling. And so it's going to affect your mood, your energy, maybe the nutritional requirements that you have are actually like ideally slightly different from and vary from phase to phase. So it's that premenstrual phase, which is also called the luteal phase, which
Okay.
really has, where all of these symptoms present themselves. And PME
Wow.
is also slightly different. So PMDD, typically what happens is that actually most of the mood related symptoms, which can be quite severe, resolve
Uh-huh.
or go away when the period starts. Maybe on the first day or two, you're still feeling down or low and or have certain depressive negative thoughts, but then these go away when the period actually starts. So the whereas if you have certain underlying, like a baseline condition, say you have been diagnosed with bipolar, anxiety, major depressive disorder, or something like that, and for those women, sometimes in the premenstrual phase, which
Okay.
is right before their period starts, these
Mm.
symptoms get more severe. So it's like they have some baseline condition, but it's getting worse or it's getting exacerbated in this phase. And that's when it's called PME, or premenstrual exacerbation. So this is also slightly different. And yeah, but I think many of the challenges are similar, whether
Uh,
it's severe PMS or PMDD or PME, even if the exact diagnosis is different for each of them. Plus, I guess there's always, there can
mhm.
also be multiple conditions at play at the same time. Like some women that I've interviewed while building HealCycle have had both PCOS and
Okay.
PMDD, and they feel like maybe there's some, link between these, where their like obviously there still has to be way more research, but they feel like their PCOS is worsening their PMS symptoms, or they
Mhm.
have, some emotional issues, or their mental health is affected because of having PCOS. So that happens sometimes. Then ADHD and
Yeah.
autism are also correlated with higher rates of having PMDD. So there's a lot of different overlapping symptoms at play here.
Understood. I mean, and I really believe that this conditions actually deserves the greater recognition. So while I say recognition, from there one more thing is coming to my mind, like, is according to you, like, how has society's like minimizing, I mean, or
Hmm.
minimization of these conditions impacted the woman's ability to seek proper care?
Absolutely. I think that is such a major point, because it's not just about, even in
Uh,
other cases, or when it comes to other types of, disorders, you don't feel like getting even a diagnosis is the end point. It's usually the
uh,
starting point. But when it comes to these conditions, sometimes women face so much struggle even to get to that end, and even to get to that diagnosis of knowing what they're struggling with,
uh,
that in itself becomes such a journey or challenge. So I think part of it has to do with the societal minimization, also the stigma that we have, right, around menstrual
yeah.
health, around mental health, and even talking about these issues. So it gets normalized. You don't realize, okay, like, is this really just PMS? Is this normal and
Uh,
every other woman is also facing the same thing? Or is this something that I need to look into and seek help for? Even if you do take that step of like, okay, I'm going to go to a doctor,
uh,
when you have something, especially in women's mental health, where what we're talking about, when you have an issue that's not purely related to, say, gynecologists, and not
exactly.
purely in the domain of your psychiatrist and psychologist, but instead, ideally, you need some combination, right? Because it's your hormones. Like, there could be a hormonal imbalance. Maybe there is not a hormonal imbalance, but in some cases, it's just our brain chemical
Okay.
sensitivity to normal hormonal fluctuations that's happening. So
Yeah.
that's why these disciplines are operating in their own domains and feel always trained in the other. They're not comfortable dealing with a problem that lies in the intersection. So that's another challenge. Plus, just,
Exactly.
even if someone doesn't have any specific, not everything when it comes to mental wellness is only like if you have a specific condition. It's also, generally our well-being and wellness and how we can take care of that better and prevent ourselves from reaching that. So even then, like I was recently part of this, I attended this film screening of a documentary called Period End of Sentence, which
Okay.
actually was made like on about 60 kilometers away from New Delhi. And it was
Okay.
the first film on periods to win an Oscar. So that was a
Wow.
groundbreaking achievement at the time. I also worked with the nonprofit that actually made this documentary. Their name is the PAD Project. So I was an ambassador for them. And after the documentary, we had this discussion circle where a lot of people
Yeah.
were sharing, So there's a lot of just social and emotional feelings that come with dealing with your first period, or
Mm.
maybe you weren't educated enough, or you had, bad experiences around pain or leakage and things like that. So those, I think, or you were isolated. Maybe there are still many families, even in supposedly, like we like to think in cities, this never happens. This is only like
Mm.
rural India where they still have taboos and
Yeah.
restrictions and all of that. But I think that's not always true. Like from the conversations I've had with so many women, like when you really dig deeper, even in our cities, there are bubbles and like there are all different kinds of people and families and mindsets at play. So change is coming, but it doesn't happen overnight. So
Exactly.
even those experiences of feeling like, okay, is this something that makes me impure? Is this something, why do I have to be isolated, or why can't I participate in
Mm.
this normal function or activity? Like my brother is allowed to do. Things like that also really stick with women. So it's not just, if you have like a diagnosed condition or something that is as severe as PMDD or PCOS, but even just normal feelings around that, I think those are worsened by our social stigma. And the lack of conversation leads to a delay in seeking help. It leads to lack of research in women's health that helps us find treatments to these problems. So it's just like a perpetuating vicious cycle
Mm.
in many ways.
Exactly. I totally agree. I mean, this is such an important point, like dismissing the symptoms
Hmm.
as just hormonal kind of thing not only invalidates the woman's experiences, but also it delays the care that
Yes.
could be life changing for sure, definitely. And so from there, like I would love to ask you about the technology part, but before that, I would love to ask, like, you have spoken about the hormonal health as well. Like, so how hormonal health and the mental health are kind of deeply intertwined. Like, for a woman who is struggling with the mood swings or maybe intense premenstrual symptoms, what's often overlooked in understanding the mind body connection?
Yes. So I think the first thing is just in every individual, not just
Mm.
women, but in every body, our mind and our physical health are deeply interlinked. And there has been more and more research on this, on like how neuroscience, or the way that you are
Yeah.
feeling mentally, and if you have more positive versus negative thoughts, and how that affects your physical well-being. Now,
Mm.
coming to hormones as well, like there's hormonal imbalances, and we have started talking about those. So that could be, it's like a complex dance that's happening between your key reproductive hormones like
Yeah.
estrogen, progesterone, and even testosterone, which is regarded as a male hormone, but it plays a key role even in women's bodies. So
Mm.
it's different for each person. Like you do need to look at if there is a hormonal imbalance, like your lab tests and blood tests will show like what's actually wrong. So it's not universal that, okay, this is what it's. There's also a lot of influencer and pop science that's going around on like, okay, just have this, have this food and it'll fix your hormonal imbalance. So it's not really a one size fits all thing.
Mm.
But especially for, if you're trying to understand the menstrual cycle, it's in that you have 4 different phases, like I mentioned. So you have your menstruating phase. That's also part of this first 14 days, which is called the
Mm.
follicular phase, where typically energy levels are higher and your mood is likely to be better. Then in the middle is this event, which is a 24-hour event called
Yeah.
ovulation or egg release. I think most people would remember some of this from their high school biology, even if you haven't studied it further. But this is
Yeah.
like the peak fertile window. And right after that, like comes the luteal phase. Now, in the luteal phase, towards the end, what happens is that both estrogen and progesterone levels fall. And
Okay.
sometimes there could be something of a mismatch where in some people estrogen is more dominant. And so that leads to certain manifestations in other aspects of the body, whether it's your skin, whether it's your mood and mental health, and so on. And it also means that, okay, so I think just the awareness of that, even if someone is not going through PMDD, a lot of women do have these like PMDD is like your 7 to 14 days before your period are going to be much harder. But for some, it's only 2-3 days, where they feel like, okay, like why am I crying more, or why do I feel so sad, and things like that. So even if it's just those 2-3 days, having that awareness that, okay, this is why it's happening to me. So, like, and it's likely to be the same thought patterns that come up every single month, where you feel like unworthy, or you're questioning your relationships or your friendships, and whether someone, actually cares about you, and things like that. There is a big impact on work productivity and relationships also. So that is typically like what happens. And then you have the actual menstrual phase also. So that's the complex dance that our hormones are playing. And if anything is off, there is a consequence of that. Plus, another thing that we miss out, cortisol, our stress hormone. If that is high for a prolonged period, like you're under a lot of girls who are just start some like master's degree, or like I have some friends who just started like an MBA, and they keep you up at all hours and give you assignments and all of that, or you have like significant work stress. All of that can mess with this complex harmony of the other reproductive hormones, because cortisol interferes with them. So stress, and especially we are all stressed in our, modern day lifestyles and everything. So stress management becomes another important aspect. So this is like, I would say, the hormonal health side of things. I think if you feel like something is specifically off, definitely like your first step is something like HealCycle can help you keep track and understand, okay, these are the symptoms that I'm experiencing, or get that first level of help. And then if it is really, you need to get specific advice, and consult a doctor, I would say. One aspect that I think even I wasn't aware of is that men also have a hormonal cycle, but it's a 24-hour cycle, whereas women have this 30-day cycle. So we actually operate differently. And that's why, like, there might be times, even if it's someone who is an athlete, or you need to be really productive at work, so you're in a really fast-paced career, those women would also feel like when they're trying to push themselves and push their limits. Even for athletes, there has been research, if you train according to your cycle, if you are keeping track of, okay, these are the phases, this is how I should work out accordingly, or this is how I can change my diet, it optimizes the whole process a lot more. And just generally like regulates all of your, the whole mind body connection. So I covered a lot of different aspects, but I hope this was helpful for people listening, and just like a 101 on what's going on. And even knowing that, there are underlying biological processes that are happening that are making us feel a certain way. It's not just our brain, or it's not just, you're not constantly feeling like low and down because of that, but you understand, okay, this is something I'm going through. It's temporary. It's because I'm in this phase, or because of hormonal fluctuations, or maybe things like that. And so I can get over this and it'll be fine. Just having that level of awareness, I think, can be helpful.
That's very, very true, I'd say. And as you mentioned about HealCycle, definitely I was about to ask you, like, definitely technology, because we are growing day by day right now. And so quickly, if you can share, like, can technology, like, obviously HealCycle, through the tools like HealCycle, help women track and decode the patterns that even sometimes can be missed by anyone else, or sometimes maybe it gets overlooked by the doctors as well?
Yes. So I would say it's definitely important and can play a major role. I don't have this opinion that any technology is going to replace humans, or the human expertise, or doctors, or anything like that. So we should see it as a supplementary and advantageous tool that we have access to. The first thing I would say is, even for someone like we were talking about getting diagnosed or keeping track and all of these things. So you have, if you go into a doctor's appointment, how much time do you have and how much time can they give to you, right? You have a couple of
Yeah.
minutes with them. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to present, okay, this is what I'm going through. And they have to make that decision, which they are experts at. But if you are able to present them with that information and show them, okay, this is what my cycle is. I've been, taking care of, like, this is how every month before I menstruate, for this is for women that have PMDD or think that they have it. Every month I'm seeing on this app, like, because we just have, like, on HealCycle, we just have these emojis, right? So it's very easy to select how you're feeling. And we also have designed it to be according to the DSM-5, or how clinical psychologists have come up with this criteria. So we have a severity scale also. So it's very easy. You go in, like, you track your moods, you can journal, etc. If you have that information that, okay, this is what my trends are, you can see your patterns, you can see your unique insights and chat with them. So we have an AI companion we made sure that we're not saying that this is a human. It's actually this cute jellyfish character. So Tara. And you can chat with Tara anytime on your own health information. Plus, if you're just feeling stressed, confused, you need to calm yourself down. It's not a generic chat GPT that people are resorting to. It's tailored for this purpose of being able to lead you through that thought process in a constructive way, to be able to suggest, okay, let's try this meditation together. Let's try this breathing exercise, or think about it, like, what is making you feel this way? So that initial level of support that you need in the moment, that is what we are focusing on and addressing. Plus, obviously, deeper insights and symptoms. Even a doctor, even a gynecologist is going to say, I want you to keep a period diary for
Okay.
2-3 months or 2-3 cycles, and then come back. And usually it's some sort of like paper form or something like
Mm.
that. And you then struggle with interpreting, okay, what's going on. They can do it for you, but even they benefit from a tool like HealCycle. So that's why they have, like, even so chain of IVF clinics have
Yeah.
kept HealCycle's brochures in all of their locations. Delhi Mind Clinic has kept HealCycle's, brochures at their place also. So even they know that giving patients that empowerment, or an app-based platform that easily, helps them record what's going on, see personal insights, and get this one-stop
Mm.
resource, is going to benefit them, because they can't handhold you beyond that 10,
Yeah.
15-minute appointment often.
Exactly. Very true. I mean, I have to say, it's a very, very, very simple thing is coming to my mind. Like, it's really, really amazing because while tech definitely provides the different tools, but it's definitely at the end, it's a human connection that really, really
Yes.
heals. So, which is very, very important. And yeah, lovely. And also, looking ahead, like, where do you see women's mental health and the hormonal health conversations going in the next decade?
A decade is a long time, so I'm very optimistic that things will change. We will have
Okay.
more research, we will have more data and more treatment options even. But even starting now with the kinds of startups, for example, that
Yeah.
are coming up. So we are, I think, rising tide lifts all boats. So HealCycle is one such boat. And we
Sure.
hope that we can give women that empowerment and level of education awareness that would benefit them, help them feel better, take care of their health better. And I see that there are going to be more advances in, nutrition research, or
Yeah.
figuring out, okay, this is how, like, you can eat as per your cycle. We have some of those insights also on the app. I see that there is going to be more research. There's even some really interesting projects going on which allow for continuous hormone tracking. So you have your
Okay.
wearables, right, that can track your, for example, glucose monitors, you have your CGMs, or you have
Yeah.
a Fitbit that can help you track your heart rate or your workouts and all of these things. But it could be much more beneficial, especially for women who are in certain life phases. Like, we didn't even touch on another target population, actually, which is using HealCycle, which is women near menopause. So they're
Okay.
in perimenopause. And that, again, is a time of all of these hormonal changes that are happening. And it feels very similar to PMDD, actually. So
Okay.
they are also like, if an older woman who thinks that they might be nearing menopause is watching this, I would definitely recommend checking and reading more about it, or even trying out HealCycle for your needs. But essentially, like, I see this full lifespan approach that will come up. Continuous hormone tracking, I think, would be really interesting and helpful for women who are, for couples who are trying to get pregnant, for women who are in their menopausal phase and want to just like manage it better. And I'm just optimistic that all of these approaches or advances happening both from the tech side, from your bio research side,
Yeah.
in biotech, in, clinical, with clinicians, like we're talking about how there are these like gaps, right, between mental health, between your gynecological health. Maybe menopause is even more whole body, so it also affects bone strength and all of that. So I'm hopeful that in 10 years we'll take a much more integrated, holistic approach, where
Yeah.
women's health is not just about like what's going on down there, but what's going on up here, what's going on in your whole body. Like, I think both for men and women, we need whole body and integrated solutions or health, because these are not isolated systems.
Very true. Very, very true. Yeah. And on this, definitely one more thing comes to my mind. I mean, it's not so controversial, but I believe, like, do you think, I mean, according to you, and quickly, if you can mention, do you think that society is finally ready to treat them with the seriousness they deserve?
A very deep question. I wouldn't say it's controversial. I think it's the need of the hour. I believe there is a societal discord right now. There is a lot of polarization in general between people who are on one side of, like, whether it's the political or social spectrum, and those who are on the other. So I think there is a lot of progress in our mindsets, in our understanding of, that women's rights, women's health, and all of this needs to be taken seriously. There is also backlash around that. So I think the first step or what I hope to see in the next few years, or from my generation and even younger, is that this changes and we are able to have conversations, even if we disagree on some matters, that we are able to come together and agree on the facts. On, even if you're not convinced of, like, okay, like, you feel like there has been enough conversation, that there's so many women's organizations, there's been so much talk of women empowerment and so on. But I still urge you to look at look at the data, look at the statistics, and sometimes they speak for themselves. There is data on the gender health gap. There is data on, even in, you talk about the professional world, the motherhood penalty of how, like, women who have to take time off after they have children, and how their earnings and their career growth never really goes back to what it could have been. So there are all of these aspects, and there is actual research and data on that. So whenever this is the concern, or whenever people disagree, I think, like, at least we can start to come together on the broad facts, even if we have different ideas in terms of, okay, how do we go about solving this? So
Exactly.
I'm, again, like, I would say I'm hopeful. We should all be hopeful. That is our biggest and most powerful tool as humans. There is a lot of work to do, but I think we are heading in the right direction.
Lovely. That's really, really a great motivation, I'd say, definitely. And for a woman who is listening right now, or maybe they'll be listening, who feel unseen or maybe uh, dismissed by doctors, for them, let's see one practical step uh, you'd like to share, or maybe you can mention that they can take today to advocate for themselves.
I think, going back to earlier in our conversation, the first very practical step is you arm yourself with information or awareness on your own body and symptoms, and are able to present that in a structured manner to a doctor. I think there is this sense of, like, awareness in a lot of, there's different types of, I don't want to dismiss the medical fraternity, or say, like, all doctors are dismissive. That's absolutely not true. There's, maybe you need to switch from one to the other, or consult with your other girlfriends and ask, confide in them and see if they got help from a certain doctor and would recommend that, okay, you also go to this person. So that could be another practical step. And actually, we also want to work in that direction of creating this sort of directory of non-judgmental providers, whether it's therapists, doctors, etc., that people have had really positive, experiences with. But the first step or the easiest step is use your resources that you have available to you to make sure that you are going in prepared, whether it's previous records, keep them in one place, and you have your symptoms. You can track them using HealCycle or any other platform if it's if something else is more suited to your needs. And actually, we have also come up with this like downloadable report for that reason or summary. So we don't diagnose, we just provide all of that information in an easy to consume form. So I think those are two practical steps, like know yourself and don't be afraid to get a second opinion or switch if you feel like you're not being taken seriously.
Perfect. That's such a kind of, I would say, whole takeaway that definitely women don't have to accept suffering in silence, but they can be their own advocates and find the solutions that truly work for them. So that's lovely. So thank you so much for bringing your voice, Anya, and your story and the vision into this space. What I take away is that women's mental health is not a kind of side issue, but it's a central one. And also combining awareness, community, innovative tools, we can definitely move towards a society that doesn't dismiss women's pain, but actually helps them thrive. So, to the listeners, if you or someone you know is struggling with severe PMS, PMDD, or mood swings that feel overwhelming, then please remember that it's not just in your head. It's real, it's valid, and you deserve care. That's very simple. So,
And you're not alone.
yes, exactly. And you're not alone. Correct. Thank you so much for bringing this. Yes. And Ananya, dear listeners, like as Ananya reminded us today, that biology is not a barrier, but it can be the blueprint for the breakthroughs. And before we move, Ananya, like if someone wants to connect with you, what would be the great medium to connect?
You can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Ananya G. So that's my first name and the first letter of my last name. We also are on Instagram by the name of HealCycle. So you can follow HealCycle there. You can also write to me on LinkedIn or email. My email is ananyagrover@healcycle.com. So if you have questions or you want to connect on any other topic, feel free to reach out.
So, dear listeners, what I'll do is I'll put all the links into the show notes for your easy reference. And with this hope, until next time, keep building a healthy mind and a healthy life. Thank you so much.